Good day, class. So we're going to be proceeding to the lesson about Introduction to C. So C, as you all know, has, of course, its own history. So the C programming language is actually the mother of all programming languages. And we have the history as displayed here in the diagram, that we have the C programming language as a structure-oriented programming language developed at Bell Laboratories in 1972 by Dennis Ritchie. And it was further improved on with its features being derived from an earlier language called B, or Basic Combined Programming Language, which is the one that is called BCPL as its acronym. So Basic Combined Programming Language. Then further on, the C language was invented for implementing Unix operating system. So that's why there was a change. People started thinking, what programming language can be used for Unix? Therefore, they came up with C. And aside from that, they were also able to publish the first edition of the C programming language, commonly known as K&R, or that stands for Kernighan and Ritchie, because of Dennis Ritchie and Brian Kernighan. So they call it K&RC. That's the published book. Then in 1988, the ANSI or ANSI-C, that's the ANSI standard, was completed in the late year of at the latter part of 1988. ANSI standard means that all over the world, there is now a programming language standard which is going to be implemented by different developers or programmers of this C language, meaning across the whole world, across different countries, they will be able to follow the same guidelines or standard. Next is, we have, so after the brief history, we now have the features of C language and its uses. So reliability. When you hear the word reliability, it means it is performing what is expected of it. Like if we know that that particular C program will compute for the salary, so we know that every time we use it, it will be able to show us the salary of that employee. What about portability? Portability means it is running across different platforms. Like right now, it could be running on Unix. It could also be running on Windows operating system, or it could be running on Linux. So portability means it can be implemented regardless of the operating system used. Now for flexibility, we are talking about C language as being flexible in terms of if you need to make changes to its functions or features, it can be also acceptable. So meaning it can be done. Now for interactivity, the user can also interact with the interface. So that means with the program, it can request the user to type something or to do something. Thus, there is interaction between the computer and the user. So the computer program and the user. For modularity, as you all know, there are programs in C or subprograms called subroutines, small programs that are enabling C programs to also provide different opportunities to use modules. So you can call functions using the feature of modularity. What about efficiency? Now, there are some languages which are really taking longer statements. Sorry, like you have heard of COBOL, Common Business Oriented Language. For you to display a certain text like hello world. It can use up to 8 lines of code. While with the C language, you can just use one statement like printf, for example, and then you have hello world. That's one double quote only. So you can have this, for example, just one line of code will do, like printf, and then you have hello world. And of course, you have to end it with a terminator like semicolon. So where can we use C programming then? It can be applicable for the following systems. Like you can use it for database systems, so storage of data. You can use it for graphics, like you need drawings or images. It could also be for word processors, like you need documents, and you can also use it for spreadsheets that do computations, operating system development, compilers, as well as assemblers, network drivers, and interpreters. So that's how powerful the C programming language is. Now, we're talking about programming languages, but are you aware that C is actually a middle level programming language? What does it mean to be middle level? Middle level means these languages do not provide all the built-in functions found in high-level languages, but they do provide all the building blocks needed to produce the result desired. Examples are C or C++. Let's go to high-level. High-level languages provide almost everything that the programmer might need to do as already built into the language. So it means there are already built-in functions that you will just need to call. So we have built-in functions. You can just, or we also have libraries. So like we have programming languages of Java and Python for that. The other is the last one, which is low-level languages. They, however, provide nothing other than access to the machine's basic instruction set. An example is there's a type error here. That is not assemble, but assembly language. Do you know, just with use of assembly language, it can actually make a motorcycle run. So nakakapagpatakbo yan ng motorsiklo. That's the assembly language or a low-level language. After the types or the levels, of programming languages, now we move on to types of languages. So I'd like to ask Rice Irvin Masiglat, could you kindly read this page, types of languages? Yes, Jamir Pierre Jacobe, would you like to volunteer to read it?
Types of languages. Structure-oriented language. In this type of language, large programs are divided into small programs called functions. Prime focus is on functions and procedure that operate on the data. Program structure follows top-down approach. Example, C, Pascal, Algol, and Modula 2. Lahat po ba?
Yes, please.
Object-oriented language. In this type of language, programs are divided into into objects. Prime focus in the data that is being operated and not on the function or procedures. Program structures follows bottoms-up approach.
Okay, thank you so much, Jamir. So you have just heard your classmate define the two types of the programming languages. So from the word structure, you are talking about large programs being divided into smaller programs called functions. So you will later on learn that functions are actually small programs. So this is how C language is structured. It has functions. And the primary focus is on tasks or the functions and procedures. It also operates on a top-down approach. And examples are C, Pascal, Algo, like what he said. No? So again, your focus is on the task at hand when it comes to structure-oriented language. However, for object-oriented language, programs are divided into objects. For example, in C programming, you can have something like compute salary. And then probably you have the hours work and the pay rate. Okay, so something like that, right? So it's about the task, computing the salary. However, for object-oriented languages, it's different because you have, instead of that, you have objects like the student or objects like the employee. Okay, so your structure-oriented language focuses on tasks, but the object-oriented languages focuses on objects. So like real objects, real people, real objects, like you can talk about employees, you can talk about, let's say, the salary. So, or you can talk about even the musical instrument. So it's more focused on the data that is being operated, not on the functions or procedures. And it is also working on the bottom-up approach. So again, that's the difference between structure-oriented language and object-oriented language. Moving further, these are the basic C commands or C basic commands. You will also, some of you mentioned Java. You also could use the basic command of the #include, which is a preprocessor command, meaning it includes the header file needed to run that program. So that's why this H here stands for a header file. Okay. So what is stdio? It means standard. That is for S. And then I is short for input. And O is for output. So we are calling on or invoking this library, the standard input-output header library, because we will be asking the user to input files and there will be output. Another is that you also must make sure there is the main function. And what is int? Int here is a data type. So what are examples of data types? So data types could be, so that is its integer. And then you could also have float, or you could have decimal, double, string, and the like. So float, you can think of it like, it's like fractions, like 0.33. And then decimal, obviously, it's another data type which could make use, which you could also make use, or string. So the int here is a data type. meaning the data that will be used in that particular function. Now, another is that, so I'm talking about the syntax now. So after the preprocessor hashtag include the main function, now you'll use the open curly brace. So this means that you are beginning the main function. So like in your flow chart, you have the start, terminal or terminator symbol. Then this is similar to that. Now the next is you can also use functions like I'm sorry, comments like you would like to mention, like say compute salary. So you can do this. So with that, that's a comment. Then another is if you're going to display text, simply the command to use there, it's simply print F. So it prints the output onto the screen. So like if I have print F, maganda ka, you can even work with any language, even Tagalog. Another is getch or getchy. This command waits for any character input from the keyboard, meaning it can, if the user presses the H key, then it will get that character input from the keyboard. Next, we also have return 0. It means that this is now the terminator of the main functions. So again, you have the curly brace, opening curly brace. Last is you have the closing curly brace to show that it is the end of the function. Why return 0? Because you're saying this is already the end of the function. And in computer language, you have 0 and 1. 0 means false. 1 means true also. No? But another is if you see 0, it would simply mean nothing. There is no more. There's nothing else to, in other words, no more value. After that, it's the end of the program. That's why we use return 0. So those are the C basic commands. And now the preprocessor directives. I already told you the hashtag include is a preprocessor. It is used to include the header files as a program, meaning there could be other files, header files. That's why you have to choose which one. So it's like before you do program, it's saying that you need all the necessary libraries. So if that is the case, then make sure you start with the hashtag include. Next is the hashtag define. So when you see define here, it simply means that you're going to define a fragment of the code that is given with a name. And again, you as the developer or programmer will be the one to give the name for that. So you can define a constant if you like. Now, these are the different header files. So I've already mentioned that we have stdio.h or the input and output function. Conyo, this is not social conyo, no? But conyo, it simply means that it's going to be invoking or using the console. Con is short for console, input and output functions. Then see here in type, this means character type. It's gonna handle the different characters. And of course, these all have their own functions. Next is the math.h, or if you need mathematic functions, the string is for text functions. Then last is time. So if you need time functions, you can also use the time.h function. Now, you've learned about the different header files, right? Now, what about the key points to remember in C programming basics? Whenever you're coding in C, please take note that C is a case-sensitive programming language. So if we already declared the variable, like example, I'm gonna declare salary as my variable. Make sure that if you use salary again, you know that salary here should be lowercase s. I'm sorry, lowercase s. So if I do something like this, I initialize salary to 15,000 pesos. When you say initialize, guys, you're giving the value of salary. So I assigned the value of 15,000. I will now have an error. Why do I know this? Because what happened was I did not use the correct case. It should have been capital S. Sorry, it should not have been capital S, but lowercase s. So you have to be careful with this. So how can you correct it? All you have to do is be consistent. Use the correct case as the declared variable. So a variable stores data. Okay. Now the C programming language, aside from being case sensitive, is also using terminators. So I keep saying terminate because this is how the computer program will understand that that's the end of a statement. So if some people, maybe your loved ones would tell you, mahal kita, and you have a period, or they could say, mahal kita. So we have different punctuations in the alphabet, right? Or in our Filipino language, right? But here in the programming language, it's using, instead of punctuation marks, it's using the semicolon. So if you're gonna put it in a code in C, you will have printf, whether that's mahal kita with question mark or with a period, you will have printf mahal kita and semicolon. Okay, so because if you don't put the semicolon here, there will be an error and your program will not run smoothly. So we have the case sensitive issue, we have the semicolon. Now we move on to the printf. Now there's the difference between, or first, there's the printf command. It simply shows the output on the screen. But please take note, aside from the printf command, there's the return command. Okay? So with return, what it does is it computes or it involves computation. So that's the difference. Printf is not need any computation. Return will always involve a computation, like you use it for functions. And last is C programs are also compiled using C compilers and displays output when executed. So that's why I told you a while ago, we have the compiler in like the dev C++ program. So why do we need the compiler? Compilers check if there are errors. So think of it like it's verifying if the program has the ability to run smoothly, because it will be the one to show you if you have errors with that program. So that's the lesson about the concepts in C programming or the C programming language.